If you enjoy this video, please consider giving a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And if you have any ideas for future videos, share them in the comments section below. This original bedtime story is made possible thanks to Slumberland patrons. If you would like to support this channel, you can find Patreon details in the description and on my channel homepage. So just take a moment to allow your eyes to close and allow yourself to begin to relax. And as you begin to relax, I'm just going to tell this sleep story in the background. And I don't know whether you'll drift asleep faster to the sound of my voice or whether it'll be to the spaces between my words. And as you begin to comfortably drift asleep, I'm just going to tell you the story of Mig. And Mig was an adventurer, and she was out on a ship and had been travelling the oceans for many, many years. And on her ship she had a trusted raven, and the raven would fly out and scout ahead, and would be trusted to return with a twig if it found any land, and if it returned without any twigs, Mig would know that they're not yet anywhere near land, and so they would continue to travel. And one day, after many years travelling, and sending out that raven every single day, one day the raven returned with a twig with a green leaf on it. And Mig sent that raven off to fly in the direction of the land, and turned the boat in that direction, and followed after the raven. And after a while, she could see land in the distance, and she headed towards that land, getting closer and closer, and before nightfall managed to reach the land. And she moored the boat a little way from the shore, in the deeper water, and Mig and her crew got into rowboats, and they rowed their way to the shore, and this land was lush and green, and the crew began to explore the land to see whether this was just an island or a larger area of land. And along the coastline, the water was rolling in onto the sandy beaches, and birds were singing in the trees. And as night began to fall, so they set up camp just a little way from the shore. And that night they all sat around their campfires, eating their food, telling stories, before Mig went into her tent and gently settled down and fell asleep. And the next morning she awoke to a strange sound in the background. She left the tent, and the sun was just barely rising over the ocean. And she went to explore that sound, and it was a strange squeaking, squealing sound. And yet the sound had a playful element to it. And she slowly and quietly and carefully headed into the forest near the beach. And followed that sound. And as she headed into that forest following the sound, she could hear movement and scurrying, pushing through leaves, running around, landing in leaves. Then she caught a glimpse of a silver coat of an animal and realized that there were some silver foxes jumping around and playing here in the forest, and that they are making all this noise. And she didn't want to scare them off, so she just carefully sat, crouched behind a fallen down tree trunk, and watched those silver foxes playing. And after a while, she saw them disappear off in the direction of their home. They disappeared down into a den. And she stood up from behind that tree trunk and continued to explore in the forest, wondering what else she might discover. And as she explored, she found that in one direction there appeared to be a lot of daylight shining into the forest. So she started to head in that direction, pushing on through the forest, feeling the bark of the trees as she pushed her hands against the trunks while moving her way carefully through this dense forest, until eventually she came out in a clearing. And the clearing was at the top of a meadow, and down from the meadow was a large lake. And from up where she was stood, she could see that the centre of this lake appeared incredibly dark, like it was probably incredibly deep. And she headed down through the meadow, smelling these flowers she'd never smelt before, seeing insects and butterflies she had never seen before flying around these flowers. And she walked down to that lake, and she put her hand in the water, and that lake water was so incredibly cold. She was surprised at how cold the water was compared to the surroundings, compared to where her and her crew had been sailing. And that lake was just so gently and delicately lapping onto the shore. And it was so delicate, so subtle, that she was able to detect movement from out in the lake, a slight splash from a little way off. And she looked out towards where she heard the splash, and there was just the subtlest of ripples seeming to spread out, like something had passed the surface of the water and disappeared again. And so she watched and waited and waited and watched. And just then she saw something breach the surface again. And at first she thought it was a unicorn. But as she watched further, she noticed that it looked like a whale mixed with a unicorn. almost like some kind of a whale or dolphin hybrid, and she was confused at what this creature was. And as she watched, she noticed it breach the water one more time before it dived back down. And it seemed to just dive down into the depths. And she wished that she could somehow go under the water, look under the water to see what happened to that strange unicorn whale hybrid, and see what's going on beneath the surface. And then she had an idea, and she went back to her boat, and with some of her crew, she fashioned a basic diving bell. And they were going to carry it to that lake, and they would push it out from the side with its makeshift frame. Some of the crew would be turning handles that would be pumping air through a tube, continuously cycling air into the diving bell and back out of that tube at the surface. And they pushed that diving bell and the frame out into the lake. And she decided that it was best for her to go down alone, to make sure that this was safe. She didn't want to put anyone else at risk. She also liked the idea of doing this alone, having this solitary adventure. And together they worked as a team to get that diving bell out into the middle of the lake. And Mig had to dive in the water and swim up into the diving bell. And the water was freezing cold, and she was glad to be inside the diving bell, where she dried off, got herself comfortable, and she couldn't see from within the diving bell. The only direction she could see was straight down through the water. And she had light in the diving bell. She had some torches around the inside of the bell. And she could hear the sound of the pump, pumping air through the top, that was cycling around, recycling the air, keeping it fresh. And the torches flickered as the air flowed around the inside of the bell. And looking down, she could see down into the depths of this lake. And the lake was incredibly clear. And as she pulled on a cord, it alerted her crew to begin to lower the bell. And it began to lower. And as it lowered, her view beneath her was getting darker and darker. And she could see that it appeared almost like deep in this lake was a cave or a hole. And her diving bell continued lowering and lowering. She realized that it was starting to lower into a cave. And then she saw beneath her that whale unicorn type animal swimming past, and it popped up into her diving bell as if inquisitive about what this thing is, before then backing out, diving back down into the water and swimming back off, and she watched as it dived deeper and deeper. And she wondered what it was and where it went. And just then, she saw it seem to just vanish into thin air beneath her. That it was diving down and swimming underneath the diving bell. But then it just vanished. And it didn't vanish because it was too dark down there. It vanished as if it had just disappeared. And so Mig had this crazy idea. She had an idea that she wanted to exit the diving bell and swim down a little bit to where that creature was and see what happens. And although the water was freezing cold, she went to the edge. She rested her legs into the water. She could feel that cold water over her legs. She then dropped off the side, taking a deep breath, and dropped herself down under the water. And as she did, she noticed that her legs almost looked like they were disappearing. So she turned face downwards and swam down deeper. And a few moments later, she noticed a slight change in water pressure. And as she looked up, she saw that she was near the surface of the water. And she swam up and discovered that she was in a really cold environment. But she could see that whale swimming around. And she swam up to the surface, looked out from the surface, and saw that she was near the shore. And that over on the shore was a pyramid. And the shore was ice and snow, and appeared really cold, and yet there was this pyramid that looked out of place, just resting there among the snow. And so she swam over to the shore. She could see a way into the pyramid. She headed into that pyramid and instantly found that it was a very comfortable temperature in here in this pyramid. She walked deeper and deeper into the pyramid. And deep in this pyramid, she found a door. She managed to get that door open, headed into the room behind the door, where she saw an incredibly comfortable looking chair that reclined. She climbed on that reclining chair. And on the arms of the chair, where her hands were now resting, appeared to be some controls, but she didn't know what they did. And so she was reluctant to press any of those buttons or move any of those controls. But then, around her, it was almost like a reality within the reality. And a symbol came up on screen, and she recognized that that symbol seemed to be asking her to make a decision. But she didn't feel that she was confident enough to do that. She didn't know what was going on. And that symbol flashed more and more. And then eventually she decided she came here for an adventure. She came here with curiosity to learn and discover something new. And that she's sure she can handle whatever happens next. And she pressed the matching symbol under her hand on the arm of the chair. And as she did, So this reality that was overlaying the reality seemed to become the sole reality. The pyramid seemed to disappear, and she was outside. And she was in an environment that seemed strange. It was much warmer, and there seemed to be shallow, warm ocean around. And as she looked around from the chair, she saw different creatures, and then saw this giant whale-like creature walking through the tall grass, walking to the shore edge, before pushing itself into the water and gracefully sliding into that water. And then she heard a voice saying that that is Anubis, the ruler of this land. And she asked who that voice is, and was surprised that she understood it. And the voice just said that it was the technology she was using, that it identifies what she's paying attention to, and tries to give her the information she's thinking of wanting to know. And as she looks around, she looks up towards the sky, and that voice starts saying about the sun. She looks over towards the trees, and the voice starts saying about the trees. And she ends up being irritated that this voice is saying everything. And so she assertively tells it to stop. And as she does that, so the voice stops. And she then asks the voice, if I stand up from this chair and explore this land, what will happen? And the voice doesn't answer. And so she asks again, and the voice doesn't answer. And then she says, you can answer my questions. And then she asks again, and the voice answers what she asks. And the voice says this chair will be here, that this space is protected, nothing can destroy this chair, that there's a force field around this chair that's a little way from the chair, that allows the traveller to have this experience, to explore a time period, to leave the force field and walk back through the force field, but nothing else can pass out or back through the force field, only the traveller. So you can explore here, and you can return here. But what's left right over there is left right over here. And what's right here is left here. Nothing that's right over there gets left here, in the same way that nothing that's left right here ends up left over right there. And when you travel backwards, you go forwards to the place you thought you were coming from. And when you travel forwards, you go backwards to a strange place you didn't know. And you can understand this on a deeper level until it's time to go. And when it's time to go, you can forget everything in the same way you forget a dream. But remembering dreams just like you do, forgetting them all the time, but not remembering what it is you didn't know you forgot. Because you forgot what it is you tried to remember, and knowing you remember some things, but not anything from the experience you've had. And as Mig became a little confused, the voice apologized and said sometimes my programming sends me on explaining things in too much complicated detail. All you need to be aware of is that you can't take anything from here back with you. And you can't take anything from the future to here. Just yourself. And she stands up from the chair. She walks towards the force field. She passes through the force field with a slight tingling sensation and heads out into the warmth of this area. She sees that Anubis swimming off and diving under the sea. She's surprised at how warm this area is. And then, while exploring, she finds what looks like an old pyramid similar to what she's come from. Only this one looks much, much older and overgrown, like nature here has tried reclaiming. And she can see that there are 10 steps down into this pyramid, and she has to climb backwards down those steps, down that ladder. And as she can't see where she's going, while descending, she counts her way down those steps. On step 10, 9, 8, going deeper and deeper into the pyramid. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. She's aware she's reaching the bottom as she slowly and carefully descends deeper and deeper into the pyramid. 2, 1. As she steps off the bottom step of the ladder, turns around to face the pyramid entrance and walks in through that pyramid entrance, having to squeeze through vines that have been overgrowing this pyramid. And as she walks into the pyramid, she can almost hear a voice in the back of her mind, almost reverberating, saying deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper, as if to direct and guide her and instruct her on what she needs to do. And so she continues on deeper and deeper into the pyramid, forgetting about everything else for now, while she walks and is so enamored, so awestruck with the inside of this pyramid, knowing that she's just likely to have the inside of this pyramid filling her mind. And she knows that during this experience, her entire mind will just be full of the inside of this pyramid. But she's so taken aback by the symbols on the walls, by the way this almost looks like what she has seen about Egyptian culture, only much, much older. And that there's something seemingly modern about this old pyramid. And she runs her fingers around the walls of the pyramid, feeling the symbols on the walls, feeling how they were carved, feeling the smooth stone, and she continues to explore. And then she finds herself heading down a corridor in this pyramid, still thinking to herself deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper, for some reason having that going around and around in her mind, deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper. She realizes it seems to be deepening her state in this pyramid with each out-breath that she takes, with each in-breath bringing a sense of calmness, of peace. Breathing out everything from a moment ago and before. Breathing in calmness and peace. Breathing out the past moments. Breathing in calmness and peace. And she continues walking deeper and deeper and starts following these different twists and turns into the pyramid. And after many hours, as it seems, she finds that she's lost in thought. She turns around and can see many paths to take, and is unsure what is the right path. And while she's wondering what the right path is, she suddenly sees what looks like one of those silver foxes again, and it walks up to her, and she crouches down and pets that fox, feels the softness and smoothness of its fur, the warmth of its body, and the fox looks at her in a meaningful way, and she says, "I think I'm lost." And the fox surprises her by replying, saying, "You think you're lost, you really do. But you're no more lost than you. Sometimes you can be lost and then you can be found, or you can be found while you're lost. But the one thing you know for certain is that you are here, and here is where you are. So you're not totally lost because you know where you can be found." And Mig is surprised at this talking fox, while also surprised at understanding the fox, and taken aback that the fox actually spoke. And the fox says it's easy to find your way home. Forget what everyone's been telling you. Forget what you've been thinking. The only important thing you need to be aware of to find your way home is that it's down there, up left, taking the first right, and then you take 2 lefts, 2 rights, and a left. But before you take a left, a right, a left, right, left, you're going to discover that what's left isn't right. And when you discover what's left isn't right, you're going to know that you're wrong. But when you find that you're wrong, you're going to want to be right. But the only way to be right is not to turn left. Because if you turn left, you're not turning right. And if you don't turn right, what's left is wrong. And I'm not meaning to be confusing by telling you what's left and what's right and what's right and what's wrong. All I'm doing is trying to be clear and make sure you know which way to go. I don't want you to take a left, a right, a left, left, right. I want you to take a right, a left, a right, right, left. But not the right, left, right that you think you take, because the right, left, right you think you take is the left, right, left for others. And sometimes what you see in a mirror isn't right. Other times what you see in a mirror means turn left. So it's easy to follow the instructions. If you walk down here and you turn left, left, right, you're going to be in the wrong place. And the route that's left won't make sense. So instead of heading down that route and finding that wrong place, make sure that if you head down here, if you see this symbol on the left of a star, you know that that's not right and you've walked too far. But if you see the symbol of a boot on the floor, you know that you're near and close to the door. But don't walk through the door when the path isn't right. Turn around left and make flight. Because if you don't make flight and turn around with haste, you're going to find your whole journey was a waste, and you'll discover yourself back here with me, and the last thing you want is a fiddle-dee-dee. The last thing you need is to hear the grey fox telling you rhymes of Goldilocks. And Mig found herself to be getting increasingly confused, and the fox said, "You're beginning to enter the right state now. It's only when confusion sets in that you can find clarity and peace. And when you find that clarity and peace in confusion, you know your brain can start to create fusion. And as that fusion happens and neurons fire, you can find your way out of this dire situation that you found yourself in moments ago, realizing it's actually a rosy glow, that it's really positive and really pleasant, and it's a wonderful experience to be had. You'll find your way back to my brother or dad, the silver foxes back in that forest. But you won't remember to tell them you visited me, because you'll be too busy having risen from under the sea. And in a state of confusion, Mig turned around left, then right, and she left. And as she left, the fox waved goodbye and vanished in a blink of an eye. And magically, so she thought, for she had no memory of what ought to have been, she found herself leaving that old pyramid and descending deeper and deeper while she climbed up those steps, from the bottom to the top, from step 10 at the bottom to 9 to 8, going deeper and deeper as she climbed up out, to 7, to 6, to 5 and 4, going deeper and deeper as she approached the door, to 3, to 2, to 1, remembering no more, because she knows she wanted to know more, and the easiest way for her to know more as she walked back to that seat behind the force field was for her to know more about this place. And while she remembered no more here, she knew that she would know more later about other things, and discover some wondrous, exciting things as her body, while she rested down in that chair, began to feel deeper and deeper sat there, and while her body sank deeper and deeper into that chair, her mind went deeper and deeper back to her time, and this time faded away as she assertively said, "I want to push this button and go back to bed." And so she pushed that button, and the reality faded as she found herself back in that pyramid unjaded, and she left that chair and left the pyramid and walked through the snow and dived down into that cold water, curious of where she was going to go, leaving behind all thoughts, all memories of what had just passed, aware that that was all her last experience here, to stay here, knowing as she swam back and into that diving bell, passing back into her normal time and her normal place, in that lake, in that bell, that everything she had seen and experienced, everything outside of this bell, can stay outside of the bell, and she can leave all that there. And she thought to herself, I will leave all that there and just rise up. No one will believe me if I tell them my experience, so I may as well just forget the experience, leave it there, and just remember to tell people that it was a good experience to be had. There's no need for you to know what went on down there. And I'll remember to tell people there's no need for you to know what went on down there. And she pulled on the cord, and the diving bell rose and rose. And when it reached the surface, she could feel it bobbing and swaying on the surface. She carefully dived down out of the bell, swam to the shore. Her crew asked what she experienced, what went on, that she was down there a long time. And she says, oh, forget it. There was nothing important there. Let's just go camp on the beach. We'll find another island and carry on exploring. And she put all that out of her mind. She walked back, and as she walked back through the forest, so she could hear those foxes playing, and one of the foxes stopped and looked over at her and made a noise, and she felt a strange connection with the fox before the fox turned away and carried on playing. And she thought to herself, forget it. It's nothing. As she headed to the other side of the forest, camped for the night, and that night drifted and floated to the most pleasant dreams, before the next day going back to the boat and continuing the journey of discovery around the world, recording the adventures of Mig.